I was stirring honey into my morning tea, the steam curling up like a soft whisper in the quiet kitchen, the same kitchen I helped remodel 5 years ago. Back then, I thought I'd be here temporarily, just long enough to help Dad recover after his stroke. But years passed. Habits formed. Responsibilities piled on. Somehow, I became the one who never left. The air smelled of toasted bread and jasmine, my mother's favorite candle still half burned by the window. My old dog Marley snored gently near the back door, his legs twitching like he was chasing something in his dreams. It was a quiet morning. Ordinary. Safe. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my parents. Just one line. "It's time you moved out. We've thought about it long enough." No greeting, no explanation, not even a signature. I read it again and again. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some kind of wrong number, or maybe a weird autocorrect, but it wasn't. My hand tightened around the ceramic mug, heat bleeding into my skin. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. It was more like the floor beneath me had quietly given way, like gravity itself had changed, and I was floating, weightless, unanchored, and unable to breathe. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Then I called my mom. No answer. I tried my dad. Straight to voicemail. I sat down slowly, my knees unsure, like I'd just run a mile without knowing it. Questions started stacking in my mind like falling bricks. What did I do? Why now? What changed? I looked around the kitchen. Every detail was familiar. My fingerprints were in the grout between the tiles. My hands had sanded those cabinets. I'd painted the trim, replaced the fixtures. This wasn't just a house, it was my work, my care, my time. And now they wanted me gone. I walked through the living room, every object a memory I had kept alive. The leather recliner Dad liked, the rug Mom insisted was too expensive, but I bought anyway. The framed family photo from Christmas 3 years ago. I was the one who organized that shoot, the one who booked the photographer, who picked the color palette for our outfits. None of it made sense. I sat down on the old couch and thought back. 5 years ago, when Dad had his stroke, I packed up my life in San Diego and came back here, left a job offer, a boyfriend, a lease with 6 months still on it. I did it without hesitation because that's what family does. My brother? He didn't even show up at the hospital until 3 days later, and left before the weekend was over. Business trip, he'd said. And yet, somehow, I was the one they wanted out. I remembered Dad's words from the hospital bed, his voice weak but certain. Family always comes first. Back then, I believed him. Now it just echoed like some cruel joke. Later that day, I passed by the family desk. The shared laptop was still open. My brother must have used it before heading out. Something compelled me to sit down. His email was open. And there it was, a message thread with my parents, my name, in bold. "Heather needs to move on," he had written. "She's gotten too comfortable. It's time she figures out life on her own. She won't leave unless we force the issue." Force the issue. That was what this was. My heart didn't race. It slowed, like my body was conserving energy. My breath came shallow. Not from surprise, but from the understanding that this hadn't come out of nowhere. This was planned, quietly, carefully. I'd made dinner every night while he sent emails like this, done their laundry, drove them to appointments. And now they were following his lead. For a second, I felt like crying, not because I was hurt, but because of how deeply I had misunderstood who I was to them. Not a daughter, just an extra. I closed the laptop slowly. No slamming. No dramatic exit. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to think. I walked back to the kitchen, sat at the table, and opened my own laptop. I remembered something, buried in the back of my mind. When I helped Dad refinance the mortgage during renovations, I handled the paperwork. At the time, it felt like an act of service. But I also remembered something else, a clause I insisted on adding, just to make things easier. I told him then. A legal mechanism tied to occupancy rights. It might be the key. They wanted me gone? Fine, but I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I pulled up the real estate listings in the area. The market was red hot. Houses in our neighborhood were going for millions. I clicked open the group chat one last time, read that message again, then muted it permanently. 2 mornings had passed since that text, 2 full days of silence from everyone. No follow-up, no calls, not even a passive-aggressive emoji in the family group chat. Just absence, like I'd been written out of the script and nobody bothered to mention the rewrite. I sat in the same kitchen, tea in hand again, but it tasted different. Flat, distant, like it wasn't mine anymore. Marley was still curled up near the door, loyal in the quiet way dogs always are. I scrolled through old messages with my parents, pages of me reaching out, checking in, sending articles about Dad's blood pressure, asking if Mom needed anything from the store, and them. One-word replies. Or worse, none at all. Then I remembered Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I'd been stuck at the clinic that day, covering a last-minute shift. When I got home, the family had already eaten. There was a group photo on the mantel. Everyone was smiling. I wasn't in it. They never even noticed I wasn't there. They didn't have to say I didn't belong. They just kept acting like it. Some silences scream louder than words ever could. I walked into my room and pulled out a suitcase, started folding clothes, not because I was leaving, but because I wanted them to think I might. Let them get comfortable. Let their guard down. People show their real face when they think the damage is already done. That afternoon, I heard tires on the gravel. Colby. He didn't knock, just opened the front door like he always did, like everything still belonged to him. I stayed by the hallway, arms crossed. I figured I'd stop by, he said, acting casual. Mom and Dad wanted me to check on how things are going. I didn't respond, just waited. He glanced at my suitcase. Looks like you've started packing. That's good. It's probably time, right? You've had a long enough break. A break? I said. Is that what this was? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Come on, Heather. You've been here a while. It's not healthy. You need to grow. He leaned against the wall like we were just siblings chatting about college or politics, not a man who'd orchestrated my removal. There's a realtor interested, by the way, he added, like it was nothing. Just a heads up, market's hot. And there it was, not concern, not care, just convenience. He left soon after, tossing me a casual, take care, like I was someone's ex at a barbecue. Once the house settled again, I walked to the family desktop. It was still there, logged into my mom's guest profile. I searched through browser history, then emails. Bingo. An email chain with Tobin Cleary, local real estate broker, known for flipping high-end properties. Subject line: family property, confidential discussion. Sent 3 months ago. My name wasn't in any of it. Just him and my parents talking square footage, layout, estimated value. Pictures of the living room. A note from Colby. We'll need her out first. Not Heather, just her. I printed the emails. Every page, highlighted key phrases. I wasn't angry anymore. Just sharp. Focused. Every line of legalese in that message was a clue. They weren't pushing me out because they needed space or because I'd overstayed. They wanted clean paperwork, a clear path to sale, and I was the speed bump. Fine. If they wanted to play cold, I could play colder. I backed up the files to my drive, snapped photos of the screen, then stepped away like nothing had happened. Later that night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My mind dragged me backward. I was 15 again, asking my mom if my friend Lana could come over. The house isn't ready, she had said, but Colby had kids over all the time. Sleepovers, movie nights, loud Xbox tournaments. It was never about the house. I remembered Christmases where he got the latest gadget while I unwrapped sweaters 2 sizes too big. Birthdays where mine got rescheduled for family emergencies that always looked a lot like poker nights or golf tournaments. The chosen son, that's what he was. And me? I was the placeholder, the safety net, the one expected to clean up, show up, shut up. Not anymore. I sat up and grabbed my notebook. There wasn't going to be a screaming match, no big confrontation in the driveway. I was going to make it legal. I called an old professor, someone I trusted, left a voicemail asking for a callback about deed language and California transfer law. Then I pulled up housing codes, squatter rights, tenant protections, inheritance clauses. I didn't know yet what I'd use, but I knew knowledge would be my armor. They never expected I'd stop crying and start documenting, I whispered to myself. In the morning, I printed a copy of the full house deed, highlighted every clause, circled the one I had helped write during the refinance years ago. Then I slid it into a folder. This wasn't about staying. This was about being seen. Late afternoon light slid through the blinds in muted strips, touching only parts of the room while leaving the rest in shadow. I stood in the guest bedroom, a space I had cleaned countless times but never truly entered with purpose. This time, I was searching. Not for keys, not for misplaced receipts. I was looking for evidence, clues of what they had been planning long before that text arrived. The bottom drawer of the old walnut dresser stuck for a moment before giving in with a groan. Inside were stacks of old tax forms, utility bills, cards signed with rushed ink. On top sat a manila envelope with handwriting I knew too well, my mother's. It read, "For Colby, deed instructions." No name, no date, just an assumption. The envelope wasn't sealed. My fingers hesitated, then opened it. Inside were draft documents, property transfer outlines, blank signature fields, appraisal forms already filled with the square footage I had measured myself during renovations. Dates in the margins went back months, long before they sent me that message. They had planned it, discussed it, stored it away, ready to replace me with a handshake and a set of keys. I didn't feel shock. Not anymore. What settled over me was recognition. A truth that had been whispering for years, finally spoken clear. I wasn't losing a home. I never had one. When I was younger, people used to say I was the easy one. The daughter who didn't ask for parties, who didn't need picking up from late-night calls, who didn't break things. They mistook silence for strength, independence for invulnerability. Colby was loud, celebrated, the name they cheered at graduation. I was fine on my own. I remembered one Christmas when I made dinner for all of us because Mom said she was tired. Everyone complimented the meal. Colby thanked her. She smiled and accepted it. They didn't reward being strong. They exploited it. I folded the documents back into the envelope and placed it on the dresser, not hidden this time, but visible. I wanted its presence to linger. I walked to the hallway mirror and studied my face, searching for the girl they had convinced themselves didn't need anything. The truth was, I had needed many things. I had just stopped asking. The next morning, I left the house early and drove to the county clerk's building. I needed confirmation. Paper over promise. I handed over the property number and waited while the clerk clicked through screens. Nothing had been filed yet, but there were pending appointment notes under Colby's name, a scheduled appraisal, consultations with a broker. How soon can a transfer like that happen? I asked a paralegal nearby, keeping my voice casual. Depends, she said. If there's anyone still legally residing with claim, like a beneficiary or co-resident, it can get complicated. Complicated. Good. Back home, I scanned the walls, floors, corners, as if seeing everything through new eyes, not as a daughter, but as someone preparing a ledger. Every nail I hammered, every dollar I spent on repairs, every hour I stayed when no one else would, that all had value now. Not sentimental worth, legal worth. That evening, Aunt Lorna appeared at the door. No warning. She hadn't been here in years. She looked older than I remembered, hair pulled back, eyes tired but clear. I heard things, she said, stepping inside. Figured you shouldn't hear them last. We sat at the edge of the sofa, two women with the same blood but different histories. Your brother thinks he's earned this house, she said. Your parents, they think silence is love. I didn't respond. She continued. Your mother once told me she never needed two children. One was enough for her story. She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn photograph. Me, 5 years old, sitting beside my grandmother, the only woman who ever asked me what I wanted to be, not what I could do for someone else. The house in the background, my grandmother's house before it became theirs. She told me once, Lorna said softly, that this house should go to the one who stayed, the one who cared for it. I hadn't cried when I found the documents. I didn't cry now. But something anchored deeper inside me, not rage, recognition. After she left, I took the photo and placed it in a frame. Then I set it on the living room mantel, front and center, where Colby would see it. I didn't add words. I didn't need to. I spent the rest of the evening at the table, journaling, not pain, but timeline. Every repair I funded, every caretaker shift I covered, every time I was told, just handle it. The truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just consistent. The sun sank, the house went still. And just when I was closing my notebook, a rustle at the front door broke the quiet. A paper pushed through the gap. An official notice. Private appraisal. Thursday, 9 a.m. Signed by the broker. They were coming to measure the house. I was about to show them its real worth. The next morning came with a text from my mother. Polite, distant. Dinner tomorrow night, family only, 7 p.m. No emojis, no warmth. It read like a memo from HR. I stared at it for a few seconds longer than necessary, then placed my phone down, face first. I already knew what this was. Not reconciliation, not apology, just another script they expected me to act through. That evening, I opened my closet and stared blankly. I picked something clean, neutral, a blouse that didn't try too hard. I brushed my hair, reapplied lipstick twice. It wasn't vanity, it was armor. Before leaving my room, I glanced toward the kitchen drawer. The ginkgo leaf napkin I folded weeks ago was still there, unused. Its edges soft from time but still holding shape. I left it untouched. When I arrived at the dinner table, the place settings were already arranged. Every name card carefully laid out, forks aligned with military precision, except mine. I hovered, not out of confusion, but out of calculation. My mother caught my eye and gestured toward the end of the table by the window. No words, just a tilt of her chin. As I walked over, Colby leaned toward Janessa, whispering something, then said aloud, "We'll scoot things down." They shuffled plates and napkins with an exaggerated kindness that somehow made the exclusion louder. I sat. The table moved on without me. Conversations floated around like I was a foreign language. I wasn't unfamiliar. I was edited out. "We've been generous enough," Colby said, half laughing, while passing the bread. His voice wasn't raised, but it was sharp. I placed my fork down with deliberate care. It clinked against the plate like punctuation. No one responded. Appetizers came. Salad with the vinaigrette I always made from scratch. No acknowledgement. Just silent chewing. Then, mid-bite, Colby turned slightly and said, "Just loud enough. She's just the one who writes the checks." My jaw didn't drop. My breath didn't catch. It just paused. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was casual, like I was a line in a joke they'd all memorized. I stared at my plate. How many checks? Rent, repairs, the down payment when Dad lost his job, emergency medical when Mom refused insurance. I looked up and caught her eye. My mother didn't flinch. She didn't smile either. Just a straight face, like she didn't hear it. Or worse, agreed. The next course came. Chicken. Roasted vegetables. I noticed one chair had been quietly removed. The space beside me, now wider. My knee bumped air. People leaned inward, voices dropping. Laughter condensed to the opposite side of the table. A cousin I barely knew leaned back and said, "Are you just lounging out there?" I smiled, not with joy, just precision. I folded my napkin and placed it on the table with care, like staking ground. I belonged here, even if they acted like I didn't, even if they cleared the space around me like I was a ghost. Dessert arrived. Peach pie. My recipe. I gave it to my mother years ago when she claimed she didn't know how to make anything anyone liked. "I can serve," I offered. "We got it," Janessa cut in. I stood up slowly, sliding my chair back without rush. "May I be excused?" No one answered. But they didn't stop me either. I leaned in just enough to meet Colby's eye and whispered, "You can attempt to erase me, but I planted the seeds in this home." Then I turned and walked out. As the door clicked behind me, something inside me unlatched. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. Not nightfall dark, empty dark. The kind where silence has been sitting too long. I parked slow, headlights cutting across the shrubs, the ones I trimmed every spring since Dad's stroke. Now the porch light wasn't on. Nobody waiting up. That used to mean something. Not anymore. I didn't want to bump into anyone. I walked in through the side door, past the laundry room. No noise. Not even the TV hum Mom used to leave on for background. Just stillness. The air felt stale, as if the house had started forgetting it ever had breath. In the hallway, I paused. Two of the picture frames that used to hang by the thermostat were gone. One was my college graduation photo. The other was a beach snapshot, me holding Dad's hand when I was 6. Gone. I didn't need to check the trash. I knew they weren't moved. They were removed. I reached my bedroom, fingers tightening around the key even though the door hadn't locked in years. Something in me just braced for resistance. When I pushed it open, my breath stopped short. The walls were bare, the bed, gone. Not just stripped, gone. My dresser was missing, replaced by open floor space and the scent of fresh paint samples taped along the far wall. Pink, lavender, mint green. A floral curtain was folded on the desk chair, still in its packaging. A bunk bed frame leaned half-assembled near the closet. Hanging from the closet doorknob was a tiny chalkboard with bubble letters, Isley's room. I stared at that chalkboard, then at the empty hook beside the window where my mirror used to be. Only the nail was left, one rusty nail. That nail knew me more than anyone in this house seemed to. They didn't even wait. They didn't ask. They just cleared me out like clutter, as if I'd died and they forgot to tell me. They didn't even leave me the courtesy of departure, I murmured, hands trembling. They took me out like dust. I sat on the floor. No cushion, just floorboard, dry and unfamiliar now. And in that silence, I remembered. The night I came home after Dad's stroke, there was no furniture. I slept in this room, curled up in a throw blanket on the floor, because Mom said the bed hadn't been delivered. I painted that wall 2 months later, sealed a crack in the corner near the vent because no one else noticed it. I kept this room standing when no one cared to. Now, I was a ghost haunting a space already assigned to someone else's comfort. I reached under the loose floorboard, still remembered the exact spot, and pulled out an old shoebox. Inside, my childhood journal, a few postcards I never mailed, and a navy sweater Dad once left folded for me on the stair railing. My name written inside the collar tag in my own handwriting. I didn't cry, I just held it. That's when I heard her, Janessa, standing in the hallway with Isley's backpack slung on her shoulder like she owned the walls. "Oh, hey," she blinked. "We thought you wouldn't mind. You're rarely here." That tone, that thin smile behind it. I stood slowly. Rarely here? I tilted my head. I kept this house alive when no one else would. She clutched the backpack tighter. It was just a practical decision. Convenient, isn't it? Practical always means whatever works for you. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Just that blank, polite nothingness that people use when they know they've crossed a line, but won't admit it. I walked past her without another word. In the attic, the air was heavy with heat and dust. I hadn't been up there in years, but I knew exactly where to reach, behind the boxed Christmas lights. There it was, the lockbox. I set it down gently, wiped the grime from the top. Inside were refinance papers, bank records, copies of checks, every piece of paper I once used to hold this house up. Then I saw it, an envelope. My name on the front, Dad's handwriting. I didn't open it. I couldn't. Not yet. Just knowing it existed was enough for now. I carried the box and the letter down, walked to my car, and opened the trunk. The metal clink of the lock echoed too loud in the quiet. Standing there in the driveway, I looked back at the house. "They may have taken my room," I whispered. "But I own every nail in these walls." Morning light didn't feel the same anymore. It didn't matter if the sun rose. There was a permanent dusk inside me now, a place where trust used to live. I sat at the kitchen table, the lockbox open in front of me, papers spread like a crime scene. Not of what I had done, but of what had been done to me. I sifted through documents from the refinance in 2008, my name surfacing again and again. Co-signed, joint, legal responsibility. I remembered the day clearly. Dad couldn't sign because his hand was still trembling from the stroke. Mom said it was just paperwork. and without thinking, I stepped in. I signed because I loved them. I signed because I thought it meant we were in this together. But as I held that title deed now, the truth tightened in my chest. My name wasn't forgotten. It was buried. Intentionally. They had kept this out of sight, hoping I wouldn't remember, wouldn't look, wouldn't understand. I printed a certified copy and folded it carefully into my wallet. Not as keepsake, as weapon. Later that afternoon, needing air that didn't belong to the house, I drove to the small coffee shop downtown. I ordered nothing, just stood in line, breathing. That's when I heard her, Janessa. Corner table, phone against her ear, nails tapping the wood. Yeah, once the sale goes through, we'll finally be done with all this, she was saying. Colby thinks we can list before the market dips again. We just need her out. I stepped to her table. You know I'm on the title, right? Her face went white. What? No, that must be a mistake. It's just an old document. I didn't blink. It's certified. As of this morning. She opened and closed her mouth, gesturing weakly. We just thought, don't twist this, it's complicated. It's not complicated, I said. It's convenient. For you. I walked away. No scene, no yelling, just a truth placed where it could burn. That evening, I returned home. The kitchen light was on. My parents sat at the table, my father nursing coffee, my mother folding napkins. They looked up but said nothing. I placed the documents on the table. One by one. This is from 2008. This shows I'm a co-owner. This shows I paid the property tax for 3 consecutive years. This, I laid down the last page, is the refinance check I signed when Dad's insurance wouldn't cover rehab. My father's jaw flexed. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I met his eyes. No, I'm making it accurate. My mother's voice entered, thin. We thought you didn't care anymore. You never asked. That's because you stopped answering, I replied quietly. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was weighted. It was the sound of a false narrative cracking. I leaned forward slightly. I've spoken to a real estate attorney. I hadn't. Not yet. This house cannot be transferred without my signature. And if you try, I'll file an injunction. Janessa had arrived somewhere behind me. This is emotional blackmail, she hissed. I didn't turn. No, emotional blackmail is rewriting someone out of their life and expecting them to disappear quietly. This, I tapped the deed, is legal clarity. No one spoke after that, just breathing, just reckoning. That night, I sat in my car with the engine off, recording into my phone. I had started doing it recently. Not diaries, not confessions, evidence, for myself. It's not revenge if it's survival, I said softly. And it's not survival if you pretend it doesn't hurt. I took out the envelope with my father's handwriting. I still didn't open it. They erased me from the walls, I whispered, pressing it to my chest. Not from the foundation. I ended the recording. And the next morning, I did what they feared most. I made a call. When my phone rang that afternoon, I froze. Maisie rarely called, and never about anything this serious. Her voice shook as she said, I have something you need to see. I recorded them. That was all the warning I needed. I drove fast, heart thumping in my ears, through familiar streets I used to feel so safe on. The turn into her cul-de-sac felt tight. I braced my hand on the steering wheel, steadied my breathing. She met me at the door, face tense. She led me into her small living room. The air smelled of old wood and jasmine incense. She placed a tablet in my hands. I pressed play. Janessa's voice floated across the screen. We'll make it look like she's not needed. Her tone was dismissive, like someone talking about a lawn they wanted to mow. Colby sat across from her, nodding. Neighbors will excuse it, she continued. We present this as a courtesy, just wrap it up quietly. He smiled. He called my name a liability. I gripped the tablet harder. My pulse threatened to splinter my skull. The betrayal I'd sensed was on display, unyoked, undeniable. Janessa smirked. Colby looked at images of the house, pointing to corners I'd repaired, rooms I'd painted. They discussed strategies to make me appear unreasonable, make my exit seem voluntary. Tears threatened, but I held fast, because I'd waited too long for someone else to validate my hurt. This was validation. Maisie sat silently across from me. When it ended, I folded my hands over the screen. "You saved me from believing I was losing my mind," I whispered. We didn't speak for a moment. Maisie wiped her eyes. I thanked her, careful to let gratitude carry the weight without softening the edges. I left. I closed her door behind me, but I didn't walk away slow. Out on the street, I turned a corner and nearly collided with a car. That car belonged to Jackson, my ex. Colby's bumper sticker was plastered on the back. Jackson stepped out, face stiff. He greeted me with cold politeness. He claimed he was just checking on Maisie, but then mentioned that Colby had invited him into a joint opportunity, that Colby thought it logical to bring me in. This cut deeper than I expected. My trust, so long held in place by weak threads, now frayed visibly in front of me. I smiled, but my eyes were steel. Good luck with that. I walked on. When I got home, I found Janessa waiting in the living room. The tablet sat between us, screen glowing. I placed it there intentionally. She recoiled. Colby's face drained blood. The room tilted. They had planned darkness. I brought light. I pressed play. Their voices, their faces, their intentions exposed. Janessa turned away. Colby's gaze landed on me like a scolded child. I sat, hands folded in lap, voice soft but hard. "You whispered I didn't belong. Now the world can hear what you said behind my back." Silence fell, heavy, dense. The truth didn't beg. It stood. Tears glistened in Janessa's eyes. She opened her mouth, but no words. Colby's face crumpled. I stood, gathered my documents, my legal drafts I'd hidden in a drawer for days. The room smelled stale, like old promises. I looked at Janessa. She began to cry. "You left me no choice," she said. I nodded. "You gave yourself a choice," I said. "You chose betrayal. I choose justice." I walked past her. I nodded at Colby. He couldn't keep pretending he didn't feel me. I knew he felt me. The sun was barely up when I pulled away from the curb outside the law office. The meeting had been straightforward. Facts, rights, options. But my thoughts were anything but. My fingers drummed the steering wheel at every stoplight. I didn't have a strategy. I had a storm and a half-signed document in my bag. I turned onto my street and felt my stomach clench. There it was. A bright red "sold" sign staked in the front yard like a flag on a conquered battlefield. I slowed to a crawl. My hands tightened around the wheel. Parked near the driveway were two unmarked vans and a moving truck. No fanfare, just silent bodies hauling boxes through a back door I used to call my own. They didn't even call me, didn't send a text, just decided I was done, and sold the proof. I pulled up to the curb, took a second to breathe, then stepped out with my legal packet tucked under one arm. The walkway was wet, like someone had hosed it down to make it look fresh. The flower pots I planted were gone. Even the welcome mat had been changed. The house was being repackaged. One of the movers looked up as I approached, paused just long enough to realize I wasn't part of the new plan. "You lost?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just walked past him and opened the front door. It wasn't locked. Inside, the smell hit first. Paint, lemon oil, and something synthetic. The living room had been rearranged. New rugs, throw pillows I'd never seen. The family photos were gone. The bookshelf I refinished myself had been moved. I turned toward the stairs but stopped short. Water was running somewhere. Maybe the sink in the half bath. Plants by the entry were gone. The soul of the place had been vacuumed out, replaced with beige. I found one mover lugging a box labeled "Kitchen Staging." I asked, "What address is this supposed to be?" He hesitated. "The house? Here?" "Wrong," I said flatly. "This house isn't available yet." He glanced at the paperwork taped to the box, then looked back at me, quieter this time. "You the owner?" I smiled, no warmth, half. That was enough to make him back off. I moved through the house until I found Colby in the kitchen, shaking hands with a man in a blazer. Real estate broker. Janessa was standing by the island, flipping through something on a clipboard. Colby looked up, startled, tried to play it cool. "Didn't expect you back so soon." I stepped closer, pulled out the deed printouts from my folder and placed them on the island. "You should have read this before posting signs." Janessa scoffed. "What are you doing? You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, eyes still on Colby. "You embarrassed yourself the minute you thought I wouldn't fight." He dropped his gaze to the paperwork. "We did what we had to do. It's the son's right." I laughed once, dry and loud. "Really? The son's right?" "That's the story now?" He shrugged. "Dad always wanted it to go to the boy. Dad signed it with me. You remember that? Or do we need a notary to remind you?" Janessa stepped forward, trying to grab the paper. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No," I said. "You made it harder when you treated me like a squatter in my own history." The broker cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Technically, the deal isn't final unless all legal owners sign." Janessa turned toward him, furious. "You said—" "I said assuming all parties agreed. That's standard." I stepped back, turned to the doorway. "You rushed this, hoping I'd be too stunned to react. You thought I'd walk away quiet." I pulled out my phone, dialed the neighbors. Two who'd seen me moving boxes, one who knew the truth. All of them answered. Yes, they saw me. Yes, they thought I lived here. Yes, they thought something was wrong. One even offered to come over. Outside, I watched the broker climb into his car and drive off. No sale today. Not without my name. Not without my signature. Back inside, I walked upstairs to what used to be my bedroom. It was empty, stripped. But the view out the window, that stretch of trees and the sagging fence line, it was still there. I opened the drawer by the closet. The leaf-folded napkin was still there. I'd made it the first week after Dad's stroke, trying to cheer up the space. I folded it again, carefully, sat it down where my lamp used to be. Then I walked to the window, stared out at the sold sign and said, quiet and sharp, "You sold this home thinking you owned me. You were wrong." I woke up in the small apartment I now call home. It's modest, bare walls, one plant I haven't managed to kill yet, but it's mine. When silence fills a place, it doesn't feel like emptiness anymore. It feels like safety. I made coffee, the mug warming my hands, and picked up my phone. Missed calls lined the screen. News reporters. My story. Now their story. My lawyer texted, "Deposition scheduled." The air felt different this morning, as if something was shifting. Then a message from Mrs. Beardsley, my high school history teacher, popped up. "Saw your piece on the news. You spoke truth." My chest tightened. I carried that like proof that I wasn't invisible anymore. Online, reactions flooded. Some applauded, some doubted. Older viewers shared stories, similar betrayals, hidden erasures. A legal commentary channel posted a video. What rights one has when family assets are contested. They mentioned my name. Comments underlined injustice with facts. She has rights. She was there. A quote caught my attention. "Truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself." It was moving through my name. For the first time, it felt like community, not pity, not sympathy, but recognition. That afternoon, I found a certified envelope in my mailbox. It was from Beatrice, Mom's old friend. Inside, a handwritten letter and notarized statement. Beatrice wrote that years ago, my mother cried to her, saying the house should one day be divided equally between her children. She claimed she tried to tell my father. Signed, witnessed, legal backing. Reading it felt like uncovering a buried vow. This wasn't just rumor or gut. It was documented history, confirming what I already intuited. They ignored her and me. I carried that envelope into court. The building was cold and echoing as I walked the marble halls. Colby and Janessa sat in the gallery. They looked distracted. My lawyer stood before the judge, presenting the latest evidence. The Beatrice letter, the audio video, the recorded documents. The judge called a pause, leaned forward. Something in her eyes said she saw more than transaction. She saw injustice. I sat quietly across from them. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream. I caught Colby's eyes and said, This is about justice, not revenge. The word landed softly, a finality. That evening, I came home and cooked a single plate of pasta. No fanfare, no audience, just me. I opened a small bottle of wine, not expensive. I toasted the walls of this apartment. To the quiet, I said aloud. Not because the storm's over, but because I survived it. My phone buzzed. A message from a young viewer. You reminded me my voice matters. Thank you. I typed slowly. It always did. Some of us just take longer to hear it. The apartment was silent again. I hung Mom's favorite painting over the couch. Soft strokes of lavender and sunrise. My new home would carry both her memory and my promise. I walked to the window and stared at the city lights. I whispered to the night. I thought the house was the story. Turns out it was just the setting.